Why do people seem to overlook errors in St. Augustine and others very easily, but denounce Father John Romanides as a heretic and do not extend the same charity? That's a great question. Well, I think, of course, there's an agenda there, and there's a kind of a hypocrisy. The approach that we should take to Saint Augustine, as has been rightly said by Father Seraphim Rose and Saint Photius the Great and others, and all the saints, generally speaking, whenever there's anything that we say, well, this is not consistent with the patristic consensus. In other words, it's erroneous, or it's a particular opinion that we don't really see, accepted by all the fathers. We just leave it aside. We don't attack the person who said it. He's not a heretic because he got something wrong. Heretics are not people who get things wrong. Heretics are people who don't listen to the church and insist on their will on that which is wrong, and then depart from the church, right? Or don't listen to the church in council and then are anathematized. Now, you can teach heresy, that which has been rejected by the church, and you can teach it and not want to listen to the church and not be a formal heretic. In other words, you were never a part of the Orthodox Church. You're a Baptist or something, and you teach you don't need to, the Eucharist is non-essential or something, or you don't have, Eucharist is not the body and blood of Christ. Well, that's a heresy that the person's teaching. They've never been a part of the Orthodox Church. They're not formally a heretic, but they are teaching heresy. I'm trying to define terms here. So, but Father John Romanides or St. Augustine, in their lifetime, whatever errors they made, they were never rebuked. We don't have any record of St. Augustine being rebuked in council by his fellow bishops and refusing to listen to them. And then we have, unfortunately, people in the West, not really during the first millennium that I can see, but I don't know, I'm not an expert, but certainly after the schism in the West, they adopted wholesale, uncritically, because they didn't have the spiritual discernment and criteria any longer in the West, errors that he made during his lifetime, which were never rejected or rebuked by the church and council. So we wouldn't hold him responsible for that. What do? We just leave them aside, let them be, basically leave them to history, leave them and say this is not a part of the patristic consensus. Don't pay attention to it. And that which is, and that which is taught, and that which has been embraced by the church is embraced and taught and celebrated, and it's beneficial to our soul. Why can't we make that distinction? Why is that hard? Why do we have to become a zealot against St. Augustine or a zealot against Father John Romanides? Just say, well, this is actually not the patristic consensus, or this is an opinion of his. We don't really, I don't agree with it maybe, but it doesn't really matter. It's not really been rejected by the church, but it's not consensus either. So we, leave it aside or whatever. You can be generous, calm, kind, humble. The kind of reaction we see today online against Romanides usually is like childish and pedantic, and just from people who are looking for a way to like score points or something. Not always. There's serious discussion of it, and I welcome that. And there are problems. We agree. There are problems and aspects of Father John Romanides' teaching that we don't think is the patristic consensus. But there's so much that is, and there's so much amazing work that's been done. It's unbelievably undiscerning to just reject him, call him names, and call people out because they include his writings or reference him. I mean, this is not orthodox. You don't find this in the old country. You don't find even people who didn't like him and didn't like him at the university or didn't agree with him. I don't remember them doing this to them. I don't remember them getting all worked up and angry and calling him names and calling him out. And this childishness that you see, it's a clear bias because there's other things he teaches that are spot on, call people out, and they don't like it. That's really the reason why they go after him. They don't go after Augustine because they're already biased. They're already committed to the Latins or to Catholicism, or they're committed to some kind of Western doctrine or teaching they think is just worth dying for. And so he comes along and says, no, actually, this teaching is not patristic consensus, like the idea in the West for original sin and certain aspects of that teaching that were big in the West, but weren't a part of the patristic teaching, the consensus, and Father John Romanides, is provocative. His way of doing things is also provocative. So maybe this part of this is, that he provokes as well. So what can you say about that? But I think our approach should be what Father Seraphim Rose said, or what St. Photius said, and that is to take what's good, take what's part of the consensus, celebrate it, use it, and commemorate the man, accept him. He was never rejected. He was never, his teachings were unbelievably helpful to many, many people in the Orthodox Church in Greece, especially. He was a pathfinder during an age of heavy scholasticism and academic theology, not in the fathers, not in the monasteries, but in academic theology. Much had been lost. They had been influenced by the West. They weren't following Athos. He was close to the Athenites. He was close to St. Paisius. He knew St. Joseph the Hesychist. He knew Elder Ephraim. He knew all these saints today in our day, and he followed them and had good relationship with them. Why doesn't that count for anything? That should count for a lot. And then, he does have ideas which I reject, like this idea that he's kind of soft on evolution, or at least he's soft on the dating of the age of the earth. He seems to be too positive on modern science. He was not really he was not expressing the consensus of the fathers ultimately about the Monophysites, but I think he repented of that toward the end of his life. In any case, we could discuss this for hours. The point is, how do we approach these problems in the church? Mature people struggling to follow the saints don't get worked up about it. And they just talk about it, and they put aside that which is not part of the consensus in a silent way. They respect the man, and they don't constantly call it out like, I don't know, just kind of childish in an ideological way.